Hello, and welcome to the third edition of the CCAA's webinar series. The goal of these panels discussions is to identify topics that are important to the CCAA and its stakeholders and invite experts to provide their insights. Today's topic is student-athlete wellness, and we will discuss the healthy and balanced lifestyle that student-athletes strive to maintain and the resources available to them. I'm your host, Jamie Pitblado from Brandnew Athlete. And we're the presenting sponsor of the CCAA Academic All-Canadian Awards and today's webinar. At the end of our discussion, I'll be sharing some details about our personal development program that works with athletes to prepare them for life after sport. To say this has been a very challenging time for all of us would be an understatement. As athletes, you know the importance of being ready to play at the highest level. You train your body and your mind for peak performance. But never before has our physical, mental, and emotional well-being so front and center. And never before has it been so important to talk about the challenges you are facing and the resources available to you. Before we get into today's topic, first let me introduce you to our esteemed panel that we've brought together to share their expertise in the areas of student health and wellness. Our first guest is Michele O'Keefe, Associate Director, Athletics and Recreation at Niagara College and the CCAA Safe Sport Rep. Welcome, Michele.
Thank you.
Our second guest, Billie Ray Busby. Billie Ray is a Digital Media International Recruitment and Student Support Coordinator at SAIT, and she's the founder of the Make Some Noise for Mental Health campaign, which just launched again this year. Welcome, Billie Ray.
Thank you. Hello.
And finally, our third guest, Victoria Robinson-Mozejko. She's a certified athletic therapist at Champlain College, Saint-Lambert, and she will be providing great experience in terms of her role. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, ladies, let's dive right in. Our first topic today is typical pressures. Student athletes generally face a variety of pressures when trying to balance athletic and academic responsibilities. Maintaining healthy relationships, managing emotions related to success and failure, safely enjoying social activities, and preserving physical health are just some of the many stresses that young athletes endure. I wonder if each of you could provide us with some specific examples that you've been involved with in your roles. Michele, let's begin with you, and then we'll follow up with Billie Ray and Victoria.
Great. I think it's a great question. Often we'll see our young athletes at college levels are indeed young. They're coming out of high school when they're 17, 18 years old, and they don't always have confidence. They don't always know the processes to follow when they're out of college. What I find, we had an experience this year with a young athlete who needed to advocate for himself with his teachers. He was finding that they weren't giving him excused absences when he had to go on the road for games. We had to end up going right to the top of the college to say, hey, you know, our student athletes are representing Niagara College out in the community, in the province, and it's important that they're recognized as such. We're not asking for special circumstances or exceptions. We just want to make sure that the student athletes are advocating for themselves and are able to get the respect and the time that they need to get their assignments done.
Great. Thank you for that. Billie Ray, your thoughts?
I think an important part from our side is to not make any assumptions with students. I'm sure we've all had these situations where maybe a student is in a slump when they're on the court or the field or the ice. And then maybe even another thing is that their grades are not going very well. And we might make an assumption on what they are doing or not doing in their classes. We had a particular scenario where a student who I was doing a lot of community outreach felt comfortable to come and talk to me because he was struggling in his classes. He had been skipping his classes, and we really weren't understanding what the problem was with him. It ended up being where simple switch. He just needed to speak to an advisor, then switch him into a different program. But he was ashamed to admit to his team that he was struggling academically. He was doing really, really well on the field. So he didn't want to admit to anybody that he wasn't having it all put together. So I think from our side, we have to make sure that there's no assumptions on maybe why somebody is struggling in a certain area, especially academic-wise, and to ask those conversations, have those conversations, and find the right fit for that student.
Oh, great. Victoria, your thoughts, please.
Well, being a student athlete certainly comes with a lot of pressures to perform and stay physically and mentally healthy. Every year we see athletes struggle with these aspects, which is normal because a lot of them are coming from different backgrounds. And so when they come to a CEGEP or a college where now they're expected to perform here, they have a very short period of time to adjust to all those team meetings, practices, strength and conditioning schedules. They also have a ton of new resources that they haven't had before and now have to learn to use. On top of that, they have to learn to fuel themselves properly with proper nutrition, get enough sleep. And it's often these last two things where we see it get left behind a little bit, and that can be pretty detrimental to their performance and actually increase their chance of injury. So we find that those are a lot of the typical pressures we see in the athletic therapy room and on the medical side of things, not to mention if an injury occurs, there's obviously that huge pressure to get back into the game as quick as possible. So we try to really make sure that they're set up in the beginning, know all the resources that they have at hand, and try to educate them with what tools they can use and when throughout their athletic career.
Great. Thank you very much for those responses. Something came out of the theme that I think comes out of this that I want to jump to in our discussion, and it actually was a topic a bit later on. It's called difficult conversations. And I think it's an appropriate time to bring it forward because each of you have spoken a little bit about, your situations working with some of these student athletes and trying to bring them along and encouraging them to come forward. And I think, Billie Ray, I want to start with you around difficult conversations because you certainly, I think, hit on it when, that student example where he was really reluctant to come forward within his own team because of his embarrassment maybe. And so I just want to ask, these sort of subjects and topics that, have sort of been kept under the rug and now they're being seen more. Can you shed some more light on the stigmas or the efforts that you're all trying to make to encourage these conversations to be had, whether they be around the classroom, whether they be talking about injuries or just in general? How are you encouraging student athletes to come forward and have conversations that might be challenging and difficult for them? And Billie Ray, maybe I'll start with you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jamie. I think there's a lot that we can do around difficult conversations. The biggest thing, I know when we were building the Make Some Noise for Mental Health campaign, the reason we started it is because we knew we were focusing on students' physical health a lot. Again, great athletic therapy services, getting them to the doctor when necessary, but we rarely asked them how they were really doing. So it was trying to make sure that the mental health was as important. And in this conversation too, we found when discussing the campaign with the students and what they wanted to learn is that it was really about mental health because we all have mental health. There's really only some people who deal with mental illness. So I think why it's so important to start a conversation is because a lot of people still think there's this stigma that in order to reach out for help, you need to be struggling with a mental illness. And in the research that we've done over the last while and learning about it a lot more, there's kind of a continuum that might be looked at where you can be positive and have healthy functioning, or you can be struggling with distress. And the interesting part of that is in your mental health, you could be positive and healthy functioning. And in your mental health, you could also be struggling and in distress without a diagnosed mental illness. So, for example, that student that I had the example about the academic issue, or Victoria mentioned about maybe an injury, these are not maybe super traumatic events, or they might not be somebody who has diagnosed bipolar or anxiety or depression, but something like that can be super detrimental to somebody's mental health. And that's where the conversation needs to be, how are you really doing? And we need to, when we notice things that might be different with a student, or again, like their grades, or maybe they're not going to practice, or they're just down, we need to be able to ask them and also let them know that it's okay how they are. And it doesn't need to be that it needs to be at such an extreme. If you don't mind, I'd like to say personally, I've been advocating this whole it's okay to not be okay for years now. That's been kind of part of my job and part of what I've been known at SAIT for doing. And I recently just went on a burnout leave through work. And I have to say that that was the hardest thing in my entire life to deal with, was to admit that I wasn't okay. And I was the one who was advocating that for years and years. So I think having that empathy and just being able to know that it's okay that maybe not everybody has it together, and that you just need to focus on their mental health and just ask them those simple questions if they really are okay or not.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, you being not okay to be okay and saying that and coming forward with that, I think just lends a lot of credence to what you're doing and what you're trying to do. And I think those other people that might be struggling can see it in you and will take great pride in the fact that someone like you can lead this. So congratulations for that, and glad to see you're back at work. That's wonderful. Victoria, maybe you could jump in here.
Of course, I think something that Billie Ray spoke about was empathy, and I think that is one of the most important things to have in our support staff around the athletes. Historically, the athletic therapy room has kind of been seen as a safe place, probably just the nature of our work. They know that they can come into the room for their session, for their strength training, whatever it is, and know that our job is there to help them, and we help them physically get back from their injuries. So we have a close connection with them, and we try to discuss things pretty frequently about how they're doing, not only physically but mentally, because as we know, injuries can be quite impactful. Like Billie Ray said, they're not always super traumatic, but they can leave a lot of fear and doubt in a lot of athletes' minds. So they know that this is a place where they're almost allowed to feel more vulnerable, just because it's the only place they don't need to perform. They don't need to be in the strength room performing. They don't need to be on the field performing. They just need to be here with us discussing what's kind of going on. So all that to say, I think it's really important that the athletes have a really strong support system. And I think one of the best ways is that they know they can come here, and we kind of have connections, whether it's with the school psychologist, whether it's with our sport med doctor, whether it's with other professionals that we can consult with to make sure that the athletes are getting the help that they need. And a lot of times what we like to do, especially when it comes to injuries, it could be quite scary for a lot of athletes. And it is kind of a stigma. A lot of them don't want to talk about the fears of whether they're going to be able to go on with their season or not. And, we always like to bring up other examples, because we all, I've worked here for 9 years, and we've encountered some athletes that have gone through some really hard stuff and have been able to persevere with the help of everyone around them. And so we like to bring those examples in as well, to show them that they're not alone in it. There's an interdisciplinary team here to help them through it. And at the end of the day, it's probably not the first time we've seen it, and it probably won't be the last.
Right. Michele, just looking in your role, obviously, as the Associate Director, Athletics and Recreation, you've had difficult conversations, I'm sure, with not only athletes, but probably coaches and staff and admin. And I just want to ask you sort of what does it take to be able to bring people into these conversations? What skills are you using, and what's making successful for you to be able to have these conversations and help people with what their challenges are?
I think it's important to recognize that we leaders are not always the experts. To build on what Victoria said, I think she called it an interdisciplinary team or something like that. At our school, we call it an integrated support team. And it's the athletic director, strength and conditioning, doctors from the main campus, and sports psychologists, that sort of thing. But what we try to make sure our coaches and our IST team, they're comfortable having the conversations with the student athletes. And that at the beginning of the year, they're brought up to speed with who to speak to for different topics. Again, as Victoria said, the therapy room is a very safe place, and often the student athletes will speak freely or confidentially with whichever athletic therapist is in the room at the time. So I think it's very important for us to make sure that our staff is fully comfortable having those conversations with the student athletes, because they're not necessarily going to come looking for me. They're going to want to talk with whoever they have a daily relationship with, a daily conversation with.
Right. Perfect. Exactly. Thank you so much for that. We've had a new thing that we've all been dealing with over the last year, and it's something that I think we need to talk about, and that's COVID-19. And obviously, it has had a significant impact on all of our lives, both personally and professionally. Certainly, it's had a significant impact on the student athlete. Many of them obviously have lost their seasons this year. There's a lot of uncertainty about what lies ahead for next season. Obviously, there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel with a vaccine coming and all of that will come with it. But what I'd like to just ask all of you, and as we think about the challenges that we're going through from a mental health perspective, a physical health perspective, and the one piece I think we also can't forget is the emotional health challenges that we face, because a lot of what we've talked about, I think, is tied into the emotional feeling, the feeling of the individual. I'd just like to know what concerns are you dealing with at the collegiate level in your roles with your student athletes tied to COVID-19, and how are you helping them feel comfortable and navigate some of the challenges that we're all facing and the uncertainty? So let's start with Victoria on this topic.
Okay. Well, in Quebec, unfortunately, we really only had the ability to practice in August to September. And then after that, everything pretty much stopped. So when things did start back up, we had a few big concerns on field. Obviously, we needed to instill hygienic practices, physical distancing, which is not easy when we're playing most of the sports that, we play. So it was a lot on educating the athletes about these issues. And then we had to work with the college and with public health to create protocols that would minimize the risk of the staff as well as the athletes. A lot of the students also have moved to online courses here. And so their presence, they're no longer at the college. I'm not sure if that's the case across Canada either, but that's what we're doing here. And so there's also a lot of concerns about how to be able to continue ensuring the services that we offer them with regards to their health, their physical health, their peak performance, without physically being able to see them. So we had to develop a lot of online medical forms for them to fill out, a lot of online booking where they can book in person if they'd like, or they can come in and we can do telehealth sessions with them, whether it be a phone call or through Zoom. And so those are some of the things that we've started doing. And in terms of strength and conditioning, that was another kind of hurdle we had to kind of overcome. So we've tried offering a lot of sessions individually to the teams with what tools they had at home. It still stands to reason that one of the biggest hurdles is motivation. We talked a little bit about emotional health and mental health, and a lot of these athletes can't practice the sport that they came here to practice, and that still takes a toll. So it's always a constant struggle for us to try to find ways to keep them engaged, keep them motivated, and keep them active, because it stands to reason that once they do come back, there's likely going to be a higher chance of injuries, and we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible. I can tell you for the small amount of time that we came back in August to September, over the course of this pandemic, a lot of people were a lot less physically active, trained a lot less than they usually did. And so when they did come back, even for that short period of time, we saw everything kind of skyrocket through the roof in terms of their injuries. And so our goal here is to try to mitigate that and minimize that as much as possible when they do come back. Our hopes are that, we're going to try to be integrating tracking systems with the athletes so that we can start a slow, progressive return to play once things do start back up again.
Oh, that's great. Sounds to me like you've really got a solid plan to help support the athletes. So that's wonderful. Michele, things are different in Ontario than Quebec a little bit. And maybe you can just give an update on where you are with protocols and your athletes and how you're help supporting them through the COVID-19.
Yeah, we're a little bit different. We're not that much different. We had our basketball team, our 2 basketball teams training in small groups in the fall. We had only 4 athletes and a coach, maybe 2 coaches in the gym at once. Again, social distancing, 1 person at a basket, sanitation stations everywhere, approved by public health. Then just after Christmas, we've been in lockdown, so that's all been put to the wayside. I think to Victoria's point, we have to manage expectations of our coaches and our athletes when they get back, because if we allow them to just go back into their normal routines, we're going to have an awful lot of injuries, and that's not good for anyone. So I think we have to make sure that our medical experts are guiding our coaches and controlling our athletes who are going to want to go 110% full speed right out of the gate. As Victoria said, our studies are primarily online. We do have some of our courses in the lab that are on campus, our nursing, our public personal service support workers programs. Those ones are on campus in very controlled circumstances. Everything else on the student services side has been moved to online. You can make appointments online. You can have video chats, telephone conversations, that sort of thing. One of the challenges we've had is making sure the student athletes and just the general students are comfortable having those conversations when they're not face to face. And in some, and I would say probably many circumstances, they're more comfortable with that because they don't actually have to look at anybody when they're being vulnerable. And no one likes to be vulnerable. And so you want to make sure that it's in a very safe situation. We've also tried to do our best with the general student population as far as keeping active. We have a part-time fitness coordinator that does all sorts of activities from home using soup cans and bags of potatoes or what have you. She goes to the park, she goes in the driveway, she plays with her son in the backyard, but every day she's posting something that anybody can do at home with no equipment. And it's funny, we've probably had more activity on those social media posts than anything else or anything that we've had in years. So it's been kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah, everyone's trying to stay engaged and stay positive. So that's a great program, and thank you for your feedback on that. Billie Ray, Alberta, what's happening there with the athletes, and how? What are you guys doing to support your athletes through the COVID-19 situation? Because certainly, I think in your role and the mental health piece has been a real struggle for athletes in general.
With Alberta, so we're in a lot of restrictions right now. Christmas was canceled in a lot of ways for a lot of people, and I would like to actually take it from a overall student population. I'm in a bit of a new role where I help out with international students as well, and I find that overall the student population is having kind of 2 main difficulties from working together and then also from staff connecting with them. So the first one is isolation. Both Michele and Victoria have referenced, being able to either have a safe space to have them have a conversation with us. There is no longer that bumping into the student in the cafeteria or bumping into them at practice and saying, hey, how are you doing? Like those, I find, used to be those conversations where you really got to know somebody, they get to feel comfortable with you. We can't have those anymore. And so that isolation piece from how do you connect? I'm sure we all find that even from our colleagues too. We can't have those little coffee chats or little walks around campus anymore. So how do we try to get that isolation fixed? I don't know if there's any answers, and if any of you have any, please share with us too. The second one that I think that has been such a challenge is just that it's also because everybody's dealing with this. everybody is having challenges, difficulties with COVID. We've all been shifting things in our lives and grief and disappointment to what hasn't been able to happen, that it's really hard to hold space for other people. Before I use the example of you run into a student, generally we're not dealing with the same pressures or same issues at the same time. So you can hold space for them and you can be a listening ear. Right now, I find it's really hard for everybody to have that ability and that empathy because we're all so kind of done and short and have difficulties of our own. So I think those are the two key ones. We don't have the answers for that from the overall student population other than trying to create ways that they can connect. Some of the classes at SAIT are blended, but majority of them are online as well. So it's trying to figure out, is this the right time for them to still be a student? Do they want to defer? There's so many big questions we've never dealt with before. So I wish we had more answers, and we look to other post-secondaries to see how they're doing too.
You brought up something, and I'm going to come back to both Victoria and Michele and ask you what you're doing there. And you've talked about the isolation and the how to connect. Both of you, and Michele, maybe you first. What are the coaches doing? What's the athletic department doing? What are you trying to do to stay connected to the student athletes and still make them feel like they're part of the team and that they're still a valued contributing member of the college?
It's been really hard, to be honest with you, Jamie. My team got furloughed in the summer. So there's me and a part-time fitness coordinator left in the athletics and recreation department. So I'm doing a whole bunch of jobs: intercollegiate, recreation, facilities, communications. I'm the social media coordinator now too. I'm also the liaison to the bookstores. So there you go. We've been counting on our coaches. We kept our coaches on a small contract to make sure that our athletes have a connection with the college. We tried to do things like early in the pandemic. It was a little bit easier. We were able to do a virtual athletic banquet and different things like that. As time has gone by and we're all getting a little COVID fatigue and maybe a little screen fatigue, you don't want to pull people on. You don't want to pull the student athletes on to the video chats more than you actually have to, because I think they're going through enough as it is. So long story short, we're counting on our coaches to primarily keep in touch with I know that we have some of our counselors and wellness peers who also maintain that communication with the student athletes.
And can I ask, coaches are, as you mentioned, coaches are connecting with the athletes. And what feedback are you getting from the coaches in terms of where the athletes are, their mindset, how they're managing through this? And are you getting feedback about any other support programs or things that you might be looking at to take out to the student athletes to help them?
Nothing new, honestly. I think what we're finding is that, I think Billie Ray said earlier, some students are engaged with the online and some of them have just had enough. We've had a couple of students who have pulled out this term because they just don't want to do any more online courses. So we just want to make sure that if they need to talk with someone about their learning style or how they're going to learn or take notes or write exams via video learning, that they have everything at their fingertips to help them be successful.
Great. And Victoria, maybe a little bit of what you're doing. Obviously, you've mentioned a little bit about what you're doing in your role, but how is the college? How are the coaches being involved? Or who's helping stay connected to the athletes?
Well, the coaches have a huge role in that, obviously. Since the beginning, a lot of them have maintained weekly meetings, either individual or team meetings. A lot of them have continued, doing their regular workouts. So we are engaged very much on that aspect. And if they do need anything else from us, we're happy to provide them programming that they can, have their athletes go together and do it all as one. I think the biggest thing isn't just necessarily the training, but it's the aspect of them being together. They've tried, when it was allowed, they tried to go to parks when we could go outside, and, do some trainings like that. But I know that they've put a big effort into keeping that contact. Some have started some video game nights where, it's not anything to do with their sport, but they'll play FIFA all night. I know our volleyball team has been working with that. And again, it's just to keep them engaged, feel like they have some type of connection with their peers and their teammates. The college as well has organized a few smaller events. We had Dr. John Carlos, who's an Olympian, a gold medal Olympian, who came and did an online conference with a lot of the athletes and staff here, and a lot of the coaches attended. There's weekly challenges that go up as well from the Student Association here. And I think, again, this is a small college. We always say a small college with big game, but it is a small family. And so a lot of times the focus here is on maintaining that connection within the community, because it is very challenging for a lot of these athletes to all of a sudden be disconnected from everyone and everything that they're so used to having. And like Michele and Billie Ray said, that they're fatigued. It's a lot of Zoom, it's a lot of online. So as much as we can, trying to get them out of that is really important.
Great, and I think, and Billie Ray, maybe you chime in here too, but I certainly think that, being that leadership role and helping stay connected, helping the athletes be engaged, is only going to help the mental health aspect of the COVID situation. And Billie Ray, I'm sure with what you're doing, you're seeing that in terms of having to motivate and stay connected to them, and you're actually seeing probably a better response from them in terms of how they're managing the situation.
Exactly. I guess one of the things too is I'm really proud of relationships that we've been able to build with alumni. And I think alumni have opportunities to, maybe when we all get to be back together, alumni maybe come in and talk to some of the students about how they've dealt with things as a student athlete, and then during COVID. I know personally that's where I've been able to connect a lot, is with alumni that have been huge advocates for mental health over the last while, and them continuing to be vulnerable on their social media, which other teammates and other student athletes are still following. So I think we're really lucky that we've started to build this community where the athletes are feeling like they can be brave and share their stories. There was a student athlete who graduated last year who posted yesterday about her challenges during COVID and gaining weight during COVID, post being an athlete, and the amount of current student athletes and other alumni and friends that posted on there. It kind of warmed my heart that there still is a community and that they're sharing and trying to help each other as much as they can.
Great. It certainly sounds like all of you are being very proactive in terms of staying connected to the student athletes, and certainly trying to educate them or support them, both in their formal education, but also in ways that they can help manage through this. Obviously, we're also seeing a lot more education being done through training, through communications. A lot of this is now available at each of your institutions, through the conference, and even at the CCAA level. I guess my question would be to you, how do you highlight the resources that are available and how they can be accessed to the student athletes? How are you communicating what's available to them, and not just as it relates to COVID-19, but in any and all areas, whether that be mental health, whether that be depression, whether that be around abuse and harassment or challenges with coaching. All of these things exist out there, drugs and things. How are you communicating out to the athletes that the resources continually get more and more of them are available, and how they can access them? So, Michele, do you want to lead that for us?
Sure. I know SAIT uses, as Billie Ray talked about, the Make Some Noise for mental health. And obviously the Bell Let's Talk Day is coming up pretty quickly on January 28th. I've only been working at Niagara College for 2.5 years, and it's the first time I've worked in post-secondary. And I'm continually blown away by the resources that are available for the students. around wellness. There's therapists, there's wellness peers, there's tutors, there's everybody, anything that a student could need is at their fingertips. And to your point, they just need to know how to access it. We always have a beginning of the year session with all our coaches and athletes, and we talk to them about the obligations of being a student athlete, and we have a rep or two come from the student wellness department and talk about what's available from them. And I think one of the things we were going to do before the pandemic, our student services department has wellness peers. And they do some great work for the students at Niagara College. And what we wanted to do was ride their coattails and create an athlete wellness peer group, so that when we have athletes come onto campus for the first time, they would not only have the session at the beginning of the school year on all the resources available, but that they could speak to another athlete if they had any issues or questions or concerns about life as an athlete. Unfortunately, we kind of got sidetracked on that one because of the pandemic, but I'm looking forward to being back on campus and being able to put some of these plans in place. And we do have some great student athletes who do well in school. They're veterans. They've had some challenges, but they've come through. And there's no doubt in my mind that they would be great advocates and great leaders for the younger athletes.
Great. Thank you for that. Billie Ray, your thoughts?
First off, Michele, that's a really great idea. I hope you get the opportunity to implement that for next season. I think that sounds really fantastic. At SAIT, a few of the things that we've done over the years is we brought in the Respect in Sport learning, which I know now has been brought on by the rest of the league, which is a really great opportunity for everybody to have training. And it covers so many different areas, from bullying to understanding power and mental health, and so many different areas through Sheldon Kennedy's work to create that particular program. We also work really closely with our on-campus resources. And Michele, you kind of said about that there is so much out there. I have to admit, I've been at SAIT for 13 years, and I didn't know the majority of the resources that were out there until we started to build the Make Some Noise for Mental Health campaign. So it was about 6 years ago when I finally learned. So if I don't know, how would an incoming student know what the resources are? So that was been something that really opened our eyes, and that we knew we needed to remind the students often about what resources are there, because we could tell them at the beginning of the year orientation, but maybe they weren't having challenges at that time. So, maybe they needed to learn about a food bank on campus in January when finances were tougher. Maybe they needed to learn about the counseling, or they heard there was counseling, but if we could actually physically walk them to the office, that was the sort of thing that we tried to do as much as possible. With those connections, with working with the counseling office, the interfaith, the Students Association, we found that there's a lot of free training that then they offer to our student athletes through the Canadian Mental Health Association and Center for Suicide Prevention. There was, I believe, one year we had 14 of us, which seems pretty significant, that took suicide prevention training, just as a free opportunity to be able to do it. And the next one that we haven't really had a chance to tap into a lot as an overall student population, that I think is key for the future is EDI training. So really looking at equity, inclusion, diversity, and how that fits in with the with Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as LGBTQ and intercultural relations. I think that's going to be one of the new trends with mental health and wellness that we all will probably start shifting our focus on.
That's great. And Victoria, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like similar to Michele and Billie Ray, I mean, I've been working here 9 years, and the support system that the students and the athletes have here never stops. It just blows me away. I think as a general rule, a lot of these cegeps and colleges in the area are very collaborative. So what I mean by that is, if we have a student with a concussion, we're going to work with the academic advisors and with the teachers to start to manage what's going on, so that we're not just kind of helping them through the physical aspect, but their social and their school aspect as well. I know for us, in terms of health and wellness, similar to the other schools, when they come in, they have an orientation session where they do talk about those major topics, abuse, bullying, sexual violence, different things like that, so that the athletes kind of have an integrated approach when they come to the school. On our end, we also do those workshops with all the teams individually when they come in, and we try to give them tools off the bat with regards to, foam rolling, stretching, concussion management, nutrition, so that, again, they're kind of introduced to the resources, because it's a lot of them come in and they might know a bit of what athletic therapy is, or what sports medicine is, or what kind of services are offered, but they don't really understand it. So we like to try to give them those tools off the bat so that they can recognize when it might be useful to go see some of these professionals. Obviously, we also do a lot of the drug and anti-doping, which is required for all the CCAA athletes. So the CCES drug seminar, we use those willingly. And we talked a little bit about difficult conversations and stigmas before, but that's another one. Is we have an open door policy where they do that workshop in the beginning and they understand what drug doping is and how it can affect them in their sport. But they never cease to come in and ask us questions. Is it okay that I take Advil? So of course it's okay that you take Advil, but you need to be careful what else is in it. So, just trying to give them those tools off the bat in the beginning so that those conversations don't need to be so difficult later.
Great, thank you. And I think you've all just touched on some very interesting and very valuable programs and identified some areas of future support that I think will become very important. And certainly, Michele, what I sort of wrote down here in my notes, your mentorship program, if for lack of a better word, or leadership program, the advocates, where you're having some of those older athletes start to step forward and become, speakers and sharing their stories and helping the younger athletes come along, I think is huge and such an important part. And then, Billie, when you talk about EEI and LGBTQs and all those other things that we're now, racism that we're all having to face, that are, again, coming to light, it's coming to light in society, and it's something now that we have to face at your level, at the college level, at the athletic level. It's something that these kids all have to go through, is very important. And certainly, Victoria, I hear what you're saying, and some of the challenges from the physical point of view, the dealing with some of the grief that some of these athletes may have to go through with being injured or career ending short. I mean, it's fascinating and remarkable that you're all looking at these and developing the type of programs and support initiatives that will really help the health and wellness of the student athlete. And I think beyond them, it'll probably help the people that are in their world as well. So what I'd like to do is we just sort of wrap up, and we've talked a lot about health and wellness, and you've all given some great advice. You've given some great personal experiences or stories from within your own organizations. But maybe I'll go around and just ask all of you to just give some last thoughts, some last comments or recommendations or feelings around health and wellness, where we are today, and what we might be, what last words we will say to the student athletes as your last chance to sort of give them some more knowledge and empower them to make it through all of the tough times that we face now and that we'll continue to face as they go through their career at their various colleges. So, Michele, I'm going to start with you on this one, please.
Oh, good. I don't know if any of you have come across the author and well-known psychologist Brene Brown. She's a professor from the U.S., I think around Texas or something. One of her favorite topics is vulnerability and how to be comfortable being vulnerable. And while I think it's important for student athletes to recognize that it's okay to be vulnerable, I think it's also important for our coaches, our staff, to also be able to acknowledge when you need help. To Billie Ray's point that she took some time away, I think there's an awful lot of people right now who who are reluctant to admit being in a vulnerable place. And so I think the world as a whole, from my perspective, needs to embrace it.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. Billie Ray, your thoughts, last comments.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning Brene Brown. I'm a huge fan of her work as well, and I think that's helped me personally in a lot of my coping with different situations. One thing that I did want to say though, and Michele, you had mentioned it early in the conversation that you try to initiate with your staff, is I think the biggest thing is that it's up to all of us. This isn't up to just the athletic therapy department to create a safe space there. It isn't just the athletic director or associate athletic director to do it, or me, who is a leader of the mental health campaign. It's every staff member, every coach needs to take this on its responsibility to create a safe and authentic environment to be able to have these kind of conversations. I also know that some will be uncomfortable with it and some will be not as empathetic as others, so they might not always be the go-to person. But I think it can't be any more of like, oh, just go see Billie Ray in the office or just go see this person. It needs to be that each of us takes on that responsibility for each other and look after each other a little bit better. I think that is the biggest key. And that's the only way that us and student athletes and the regular student population are going to feel comfortable to reach out, is if they know that we all have each other's backs.
Oh, that's great. Victoria, some final thoughts from you, please.
I agree wholeheartedly with both being vulnerable and working in a collaborative environment. I think there's nothing I can add to that. With regards to physical health, which stands very closely with mental and emotional health as well, I think it's very important just for the athletes to try to be consistent with their trainings, with their nutrition, with sleeping. It's not something that usually is the first thing to go, but it's a huge predictor of injury, and it's a huge predictor of a lot of other mental illnesses as well. I think what's important too is that, again, we talked about resources a lot, but just to do your homework and look into the resources that are available. Go ask somebody you trust, a person, to see what is available in the school and how you can utilize it, because you will go through a lot of ups and downs in your career. And in almost everything you go through, there will be someone around there to help you.
That's great. And I think what I've taken away from today, from all of you, and I guess I would sum it up for those that are watching, is just know that you're not alone. You've got a large community of people that want to support you, whether that be within your family, your neighborhood, your friends, certainly at the colleges, within the teams, coaches, teammates, athletic departments, therapists. They're all there for you. And I encourage everyone to take full advantage of the resources that are provided through the colleges, through the conferences, and through the CCAA to support all athletes, student athletes, in their wellness. And please make sure as an athlete, you take full advantage of the opportunity. And I think if you're, it's okay not to be okay, as Billie Ray so rightfully said. And please come forward. So. Ladies, I want to thank all of you, Michele, Billie Ray, and Victoria, for sharing the ways your athletic departments and institutions are working to address some of the internal and external pressures that are experienced by our student athletes. I know it's tough times. You're doing yeoman's work, all of you, and thank you very much for what you're doing, just to try and make the world a little bit of a brighter place, not only for the student athletes, but probably for your staff and yourselves at the same time. So thank you for that. Also to Choyle Brown and SportsCanadaTV, who are doing all the production support behind the CCAA webinar series. I want to say thank you for all that you guys are doing. It's great to be able to bring these professionally produced programs forward and to help people along the way. I personally would like to thank the CCAA for providing Brandnew Athlete the opportunity to be the presenting sponsor of both the CCAA Academic All-Canadians and today's webinar. It's really quite neat for me to be part of this particular one because I heard a lot of things here that are very valuable, I think, for what we do as a company. And I just want to let sort of people know what Brandnew is. And we're really a Brandnew Athlete is a transformation program that's online, video-based, and it's an inspirational learning platform that focuses on the personal development of elite athletes while they're still competing. We take a holistic approach to fully equip athletes to transform their lives for further greatness. Our program is divided into 5 powerful pillars where we help you discover who you are, we define your personal brand, discuss issues relevant to sport and life, develop the skills necessary for personal growth, and inspire where former athletes share their personal stories. Our content is created by experts to ensure that athletes are engaged, inspired, motivated, and educated about issues that are relevant to both sport and life. And we believe that Brandnew is the difference between ordinary and extraordinary. We like to empower the whole athlete to get in the game, body, mind, spirit, and heart. And we believe the quality of life lived should equal the quality of sport played. And we transform the human doing into a human being. And at the end of the day, we want to inspire elite athletes to be extraordinary people. So I encourage you, if you're a student athlete and you're interested in personal development and knowing more about how you can be the best that you can be both now and in the future as you think about life after sport, to check out brandnewathletE.com and keep an eye as we will be bringing a special offer out to all the student athletes who are interested in looking at how they can improve themselves both personally and professionally. So to all of you, again, I say thank you very much. And to the CCAA, I congratulate you on your efforts to put these type of educational programs forward. So to all the very best in 2021, and let's hope that it's a much better and more productive year than 2020 was.
That's for sure.
Thank you, everybody. Great to see you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.